I'm from Melt Content, the Chief Commercial Officer, and at Melt Content we specialise in creating content marketing strategies, but it's focused on data-led insight to choose the right strategy, to choose the right content to create a return on investment for our clients. Now, my background, as you've just heard, it actually spans across agencies and client side. So I've been within some of the digital marketing agencies managing multi-channel disciplines such as PPC, SEO, affiliate marketing, email and social, and also within some of the big brands. My experience within e-commerce is broad across the different sort of industries, whether that's travel, insurance, financial or consumer, as you can see on the slides. What I'd like to do today is to take you through, from my perspective, what I believe makes international marketing different. Some of the challenges I've written for global marketeers, but essentially it's my perspective. Localisation and best practice, and how even the big brands can get it wrong. Later on, I'll go through the content marketing framework that we use at Melt, and it sort of centres on the 4 pillars that we have: data, strategy, content, outreach and distribution. So what makes international marketing different? On the left-hand side, you can see the more traditional differences between domestic and international, such as the competitor behaviours, the legal aspect, the currency and the language. But on my side, having both experience within brands and agencies, on the right-hand side is really where the 3 areas where I personally have come up against hurdles or in terms of what you have to focus on to get it right. So for me, the framework, which I'll get to later on, remains the same. So the marketing framework remains the same. It's the customer data and that insight that has to change. And it's very important not to make any presumptions and think that one size fits all. So something that will work in the UK doesn't necessarily work in America. Something that works within Europe for Germany doesn't necessarily work for France. So it's important that at each step you take into account the customer data and the insight. Setting aside the more sort of localisation and native piece, you've got the global setup, and this is something that we've probably touched on earlier today, but from a technical perspective, whether that's from SEO or whether that's actual management of multiple domains, it's really about understanding what are your priorities and what is the manpower that you have. So for example, you could have one domain that it manages all of the trade internationally, or you could have multiple separate domains. Now that decision as to what will lead you down to that place obviously takes into account SEO, but also in terms of marketing teams, whether you have the bandwidth and the manpower to to have a cohesive strategy, but also to continue to push the marketing out across the board. And then in terms of localisation, if you're having a multi-channel marketing campaign, it's very important to have localisation and translation of that content. And those are the key 3 areas where I think that if you don't manage and observe and make sure that you get it right, you can have some big hurdles down the line. Just to touch on slightly the SEO setup potentially for the global setup or the technical aspects, if you wanted to look in further, a few years ago I wrote for a digital marketing magazine, so you could either Google 4th source international SEO, or later on if you get the slides then I've put a link within there. So localisation. For me, the key really is data and getting a native's point of view. So every market has different behaviours and different preferences, whether that's online or within the actual marketing channels. So we have different social platforms that we use different search engines, languages, and that can often be led by the mobile habits or usages, which could even derive from the internet speeds within the specific market. It's really important to understand that the principles of marketing remain the same, but it's the data and the insights that you gather from that make it unique. So these are some of the best practice for international localisation. So I'm just going to touch on the limited and the optimised for responsibilities, strategy, data, content and search marketing. So under the responsibilities, if you're not focused and you're very limited, that means you haven't defined your international responsibilities. Whereas for the optimised, you'll have region-specific responsibilities which will be integrated and collaborative across the teams. For strategy, there'll be no localization or strategy if it's limited. But if you've optimized it, it will mean that you have a strategic approach to localization with regular review and a native's point of view. In the data, which for me is really the key point, you potentially could come up and see that there's actually, if you're going to go international, a lot of the time people don't even look into the data or the customer in that specific territory. Whereas to optimize would be to take that view and get a lot of customer specific data, their pain points, their queries, and understanding the solutions that your marketing is going to tailor to that. In terms of content, no local content, but for optimized it would be all the content is unique and with localized tools and assets specifically based on the data that you've gathered. And for search marketing, no international digital marketing strategy or perhaps limited SEO, one size fits all. Now, for an optimized view, it would be having a dedicated outreach, content marketing, and multi-channel localized campaigns. So each channel is localized, each channel is translated, but that does take a lot. So if I was going to be leading a team that was new to international marketing, obviously going through some of the best practices for international marketing, but these are the kind of the key areas that I would probably want to communicate to them based on my experience. So from my experience, the coordination and fighting priorities is one of the key challenges. So in coordination, it's essentially, if you've got, whether it's international teams, whether it's even within the same office, or you've got technical priorities, or you've got product priorities, having that coordination and project management of your marketing is incredibly important, and fighting for those. And I believe it all starts and ends with data. So it's important, as I mentioned earlier, to get the data across your segments of the territory, the location, and to think like a local. And in the aspect of growing globally is really to think in terms of scale and adapt the idea. And later on we'll go into how you can do that, how you can scale, and how you can take a theme out of that data. And essentially what you want to do is remain true to the key message behind your campaign, but whether it's adapting it for the international market or whether it's scrapping it and starting again, but whilst remaining true for your overall strategy. The multi-channel consistencies. Now, in my experience, this is where, and if you were to look at some brands, that this is one of the biggest hurdles that they have, is actually being consistent in the message across all the different territories. So you might find that somebody's managing, whether you've got an MD of a specific country or you've got multiple marketing teams within that one business. It's how to have a cohesive and coordinated approach. That is one of the most commonplace issues or challenges. And from an SEO perspective, the actual technical setup and understanding, so whether that is one domain or multiple domains, and it's based on your budget and the longer term goals of the business. So even the big brands can get it wrong. So the reason why I put this here is because essentially you don't know until you research, and it's really important not to make any presumptions and always to look. So here you've got Kellogg's have had to rename their brand Bud cereal because it roughly translated to burned farmer. And when I was working at Low Cost a few years back, when we had an Irish MD and the UK team were doing sort of a Black Friday promotion, and I think the Irish MD almost had a heart attack because they were going to roll out and push out Black Friday onto the Irish market, which was, a few years back, it was very closely associated to Bloody Friday. Nowadays, it's not so true, and they're even considering embracing it because of a new generation that is less emotionally attached to Bloody Friday, and also with the US is sort of leading the way. But it's really important to always sense check and get a native's point of view. And obviously Pepsi as well. Their brings you back to life slogan translated to Pepsi brings your ancestors back from the grave. Now, moving on to the content marketing framework. Essentially, from my point of view and Melt's point of view, everything sits within, or the customer sits within the middle, whether that's the needs, the pain points, the queries, and the behaviours. It's very important to be customer driven. And when you come to I'm sorry about the slides. It looks fine on my screen. When you come to a multi-channel approach, we believe that content sits within the middle. The next slide takes you through the user journey. So you've got awareness, consideration, purchase, service, and loyalty. And these are some of the channels and the different touch points that a customer or a user might interact with through the process. So you've got PR or above the line, radio, TV, and then potentially onto PPC within awareness that comes back into consideration, and throughout the purchase onto reviews after they've purchased, and potentially onto FAQs on the knowledge base in the service, and then onto loyalty, perhaps that's viewing their blog or coming back via a newsletter or promotion. Now this is a travel-specific example which takes the user journey and expands on it. So here, this is where you can see more of the types of content or the channels that can sit within this user journey. So for example, inspiration, which could be Pinterest, it could be YouTube videos. Somebody's thinking, I want to go on holiday, but they're not sure where. And then it leads through to research, target, selection, comparison, purchase, and recommendation or review. And within here, I've outlined some of the channels that you might use within those different stages, but it also alludes to the type of content that you might have. Now, essentially, it's attracting the right traffic at the right time within the user journey, which in reality is inbound marketing. It's answering the reader's needs at the right time. And a little bit just on inbound marketing, it's essentially creating the right content that pulls users towards your brand when the customer is actively looking for it. It approaches them where they are when they're looking for their needs. And essentially for me, my background or my passion is really in SEO and social and content. And so for me, I feel that SEO is hugely important in this piece. So that, from a marketing director's point of view, when I was at Low Cost, we would spend millions of pounds on paid search. And essentially, if you don't have a really strong organic search campaign or in terms of the whole marketing mix, you can't afford to continue to spend a huge amount of money on your paid search because the overall cost per acquisition is very high. So you need, in my opinion, you need SEO or the organic channels to be a part of the mix. Now this is a good illustration or visualization in terms of earned, owned and paid. So within owned media, you have web properties, so that would be your website, the blog site or the social media channels. And then with earned, that would be when somebody sort of reviews or shares or posts. And then the paid media would be the paid PPC, the display, the retargeting. And in the middle, this is where I feel that you have, this in my view is a comprehensive digital marketing campaign, whether it's a content marketing campaign or it's a digital marketing campaign. The sweet spot is in the middle where you're using the benefit of each to amplify each other. Now, just before we start onto the framework, it's always important to define your goals, and this is something that we'll refer back to later on in the framework. So essentially what I've done here is I've outlined the user journey that we've just gone through: awareness, consideration, purchase, service and loyalty. And this is where you outline your objectives, your strategy and your key performance indicators. So for example, in awareness, it might be to increase your brand awareness. And for an objective would be to increase your monthly visits by 15% in 6 months. And the strategy might be to increase SEO value of the website, and how you'll measure that, your KPIs, would be organic visits or percentage of organic visits. Now at Melt, we have 4 marketing pillars that we work from. And what I'm about to take you through is pretty much the offspring for each of these 4 pillars. So we've got research and data, strategy and return on investment, content creation. And within the content creation, it's not to text alone, it's also video, whether that's images. It's essentially having the right content for the right strategy, whatever that might be. Outreach, PR and distribution. So within here, you can see that under research, we've got data and analysis. And effectively, this is where you gather all of your data about the customer. You build your personas, you get at your data and you do your research. So you'll want to understand about your target audience, the keyword research, customer personas, the community, social sentiment. And within analysis, the competition, opportunities and gaps, topics, search volumes, and benchmark. Now, these stages that I'm about to take you through, and this is just like a checklist or it's a guideline. It doesn't mean that in every instance you're going to need every one of these pieces, but it enables, and this is what we use within our business, so that when we're creating a marketing strategy, we have a guideline to work with, and later on we'll put it into a thematic matrix, which will be a short and sweet little reference point for you to expand on. Now, all of this data, whether you have it, whether it's a paid tool, whether it is your analytics from your site data, or whether it's free data, there's a lot out there that you can use. And in here, I've just outlined some of the free data that you can use, which is around search volume and search query. And quite handy is the answer the public. It's a little bit of old data, but it's query visualization. So if you're looking for a nice visual way of seeing what people are asking for and what themes they're interested in, that can be quite useful in illustrating and pulling that apart. But it's important at this stage to do a lot of research, so on Google, on YouTube, on Facebook, looking into the communities and the different topics. So once you've gathered your data, it's about defining what type of strategy you want, whether it's social, content, PR, outreach, and the types of key performance indicators that you're going to target. What's going to be your return on investment, or what does success look like for you? Now, this element, content creation, we break this down into the 3 Ps: plan, prepare, and publish. Now, later on, we'll go into how we pull out the themes, but within the theme section, this is where, from the data, you'll take the data and you'll look into the themes to see, okay, what type of content gets shared, what type of queries are people having? Are they on social media? Who are the influencers? Where are we publishing this? And you'll break this down. In terms of preparation, again, this is not all used for all different types of strategy, but for example, if you were to look to prepare an outline, if you were writing an article, you might want to say, right, what's the hook? What's the angle of the argument? Or a video, what's the style? What's the tone of voice? What is key and what is essential is the value proposition. So what are you offering to the customer or consumer? And what is your return investment? What is the call to action? How are you going to bring the content that you create and funnel it back to achieve the return on investment that you need? And then publish. Who are you going to work with? Where are you going to place it, and when? Now, outreach and distribution is massively important to a content marketing end-to-end strategy. But in this instance, if you're looking for a sort of more multi-channel, you might want to have outreach or distribution or a mixture of both. And whether from outreach, that's the publishers, the influencers, or the brand ambassadors for the mainstream or within your specific niche. And in terms of distribution, you have the paid promotion and organic promotion. Now, this is the thematic matrix that we use internally. So effectively, based on the data, we will look for opportunities that we see. What is the competition doing? What is the competition not doing? What are the queries that our customers or consumers are asking? What kinds of theme do we get a great uptake on? Where is there an opportunity, or where is there a gap? And this is where we can outline the types of content, how it's going to, which area, whether it's social media or native advertising or shareable content, and we can place this within our themes. Now, how this feeds into the international piece is that when you're trying to coordinate across international markets, you can take one theme, for example, if it's the island's finest, and you might want to say, okay, we're going to do American's finest, or exclusive experiences within certain different countries. Now, the data has to be unique to the territory, and it has to be unique insight. But you can have the main theme that will be presented to sort of an overarching cohesive marketing strategy. And this is a great way to ensure that your marketing teams are working together. Now, this is just to end and to reiterate, really, the 4 pillars of what I believe is a solid content marketing campaign. And it really starts and ends with data, whether it starts with the customer insight or whether it ends with the performance, the reviewing, the refining, or the pivoting to change. It's really important to use the data and always to reference back to it. And then from an international perspective, it's about understanding your market, getting a native's point of view, localizing it, and understanding what is needed to have a cohesive marketing plan. Thank you.